I even take credit cards from them. So, the panel is the challenges of creating a multi-planet civilization. Jameson Hogan, he or she is not here. Everyone else is here, so I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with the guy who's got the silver badge.
Hi, I'm Jason Betts. I'm the fifth for the party liaison. My handle is Amy. A lot of people look and go, fifth, huh? It's the 5th of Jan. Exactly.
Appearing here all week, folks. Tip your wares and waitresses. Try the deal.
I'm also, professionally, I'm a business analyst.
Professionally, I'm an IT director, so go ahead.
Professionally, I'm the marketing department for Color World Books, so I play Rachel Kelly on the internet. I'm the Felicity Smoke of the dynamic duo. She does the crime fighting, I do all the behind-the-scenes stuff.
I'm Susan Weiner, and I'm a biologist, so mostly physiology, so I'm interested in this from how do we physically cope with lots of different planets and different situations.
All right, since we've got such a massive crowd here, we're going to try to be a little less formal, I think. So if you have a question, just kind of wave at us and we'll try to answer it. All right, so the panel is challenges of creating a multi-planet civilization. Someday we may be able to colonize other worlds, and while it's really exciting, it will bring up some significant challenges. What will it take to bring a true solar system-wide economy and social structure? Let's see, which one do we want to start with? Well, here's what fascinates me, and I'll throw this out to the panel and see if they also fascinate. Why would humans go, and what kind of humans would go if the magic drive shows up and we can go to anywhere in the solar system? Who would go and why?
Well, the same people who went every other time a frontier has been opened up. The people who don't have a lot of things to look forward to where they are and who are willing to take chances. A lot of young men, but also families looking for anything better than where they currently are.
And I think that history has shown us that religion will be the motivator for, right? It was the motivator for America. It was the motivator for the Mormons to move west. I mean, it's been, the religions of the world have dominated the kind of why you have to leave when it comes to a situation, right, where what you currently have doesn't offer enough for you to stay, then you pick up and go, and there's that component of you have to be brave enough to be willing to see what's on the other side to make it worth your while.
Well, the darker side of that is that, yeah, religion was one of the motivators, but a lot of that was because of oppression. And you had a lot of the groups left because the place they were at was really, really terrible to them. So they went, anything is better than this. And saying, we get to make the rules? Awesome. We get to we get to oppress the other people instead.
Well,
Let me ask a question then. All right. This is one thing to pick up and go to America where you can breathe the air and eat the food and drink the water. But, I mean, none of the above applies in Mars. Does that have a factor?
Well, it makes money the most important thing about, right? So, I mean, one of the things in there is the economy. And I think right now we're all kind of watching Europe because if Europe fails, then why go colonize another planet, right? If they can't come up with a single currency that holds together, if they don't integrate into a banking union, then there's almost no chance of having interplanetary. We could certainly go start another planet, but in terms of interplanetary economy, if Europe can't do it, then gosh knows Earth and Mars can't do it.
Well, I think you're assuming there that the goal is to have a coherent, a coherent civilization, I guess, of one unit or one interconnected unit, as opposed to a group that is leaving and then will maintain some connections and trade with the home world, but not necessarily have the goal of being part of the same governmental unit.
Well, and I think it depends on under what auspices they leave, right? So if they leave because they're being oppressed, I think the chances are that they have almost anything to do with becomes none at all, right? And then they don't even have to worry,
Well, tell that to the Puritans. They were under contract. They were oppressed. They left. They
Yep.
left Europe on purpose.
Yep.
But they had a contract. They were creating a colony to produce something for a company back home.
Right.
All of the Great Age of Sail colonies were created because of one of two things. Either we can't grow it at home, or it's become very rare at home. The northern colonies of the U.S. were mostly built for timber, and the ones in the south were done for tobacco,
Yep.
sugar, and rice. So a lot of this is for building an economy is really going to be the magic drive that makes it so that it's not $1 million per pound to get it from one side to the
Yeah.
other.
Yep, and I think the big issue there, we're talking about the, oppressed peoples who would want to leave. Oppressed peoples don't tend to have a lot of money.
Yeah, somebody. Well, I mean, that's a perfect example of, in some way, the people that have the money, it's mutually beneficial. So they want to leave, and these people have money, but really don't want to leave, but they need this stuff. And so I would say rare earths would be the thing that I can think of that there's been conversations of not being enough, and China controls the majority of them. And so I could see American billionaires.
There are plenty of rare earth mines in the U.S.
Well, and yeah,
Rare
but
earths are actually not very rare.
so a lot of it's in California.
Southeast Asia, Southwest. I'd actually say copper would be one of the bigger ones because it's been mined for so long.
Mm-hmm.
New deposits are getting very hard.
Mm-hmm.
If we found something cool to do with, say, iridium, something that's very rare on Earth, but is very common in the meteor asteroid belt. Thank you. That would be something much more.
Right.
Well, okay, but I mean, I won't play devil's advocate, even though I wrote a book about settling Mars. I won't be devil's advocate for a minute. I mean, are we really going to have colonies out there, or are we just going to be like the oil platforms, and we send a crew out there for a 6-month cruise to, dig, and then they replace them, or we send a robot out and let the robot do the work?
So being that I lived in North Dakota for the last 3 years until I sold everything and moved my family into a 30-foot RV, that's how it starts, right? You start by you send the men, and the women and children stay behind, and you drill, and we punched a lot of holes, and then it was like, well, this is pretty crappy. I want my wife and my children. So then you send for them, and then you have this tug of war between those who've brought their family and those who think it's not right to bring, right? And so I don't see why it would go any different than previously. We would send them in, we'd figure something out, and then women and children, I guess, go next, unless, because sexual orientation and women are kind of at the forefront of what we're struggling with as a culture right now, both in America and abroad, maybe the women go first, and then they send for their husbands and children.
So Mars needs men, is what you're telling me.
Well, Mars needs hands. I'm going to say that in general, if we're going to go off into this place, to this planet, what we're going to do is a lot of machine operated things.
Absolutely.
And a woman can run a joystick just as well as a man.
Yep.
They can do a lot of the work. Assuming that people don't go, oh, this is too dangerous for women, which is total BS.
But culturally, still to a large degree, women are not socialized to be willing to take the risks, whereas men are socialized to
Sure.
be encouraged to take the risks. And I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily anything inherent, but that is the way people are socialized in our society.
We could also have, since it's so far away and so probably not coming back anytime soon, you have an LV-46 situation, like on the movie Aliens, where you quite literally drop phalanx, not because it makes it suck less, but it makes because you're not coming back.
I do think there's one more thing to consider in the not quite the same as the oppressed people situation, which is climate change. There are whole countries that are going to be uninhabitable in a few decades. And not all of them are poor countries. And I don't think that that's necessarily, I could see some of the richer ones of those trying to do this as a way to get more money, get more resources, not necessarily to bring their entire population out there, that's not probably realistic, but to get resources in order to have better bargaining chips back on Earth.
Have you seen 100? I think it's 100.
The 100?
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
The baseline idea is the big oops happen. The world is unusable. Everyone lives on space stations until they go. The space stations are breaking down. We're gonna drop a bunch of convicts down to see if people can live.
Right.
Convicts happen to be very photogenic young
Young people.
teenagers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
With perfect teeth and access to high-end hair care products.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a CW store. I mean, what can we say?
Yeah.
I saw when I saw the first part episodes, and it's bunch of 20-somethings with good teeth and good hair care and all this. Because I'm like,
Well, I watched the whole first season, and the reason I bring that up is in terms of, if we get to this point where some kind of homework is done, and I think with people being concerned with climate change, there's a lot of homework that's being done, that if we could get to the point where we would send a group of people, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but Australia, right, and the whole,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the pattern is there, the TV show is there, all we have to do is throw people in a spaceship and send them off.
with good hair care products.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned TV. Right after World War II, how many movies came out that ended with the guy gets the girl, he settles down, and they have a family? This was not entirely just because. The U.S. government did talk to Hollywood and said, really, we need the next generation of kids.
Right.
Please make this happen. Having television shows, movies that make this more make this more agreeable
Very nice.
would definitely be a thing that people might do.
And it's not hard to advertise if that's what we wanted to do. I mean, it's the classic extension of the American dream, but there are plenty of other cultures that have similar traditions and similar drives that could be developed in the same direction.
You can also push the idea that with climate change, there are going to be countries that are going to be underwater. Then a number of these places have literally hundreds of millions of people. And you say, well, okay, your homeland is gone. Instead of trying to go to England or to Africa or wherever, why not Mars? Why not go someplace where there aren't people already? Why don't we start over fresh in New Bangladesh or new flooded nation?
No.
And start things off.
Well, and it's not just third world countries. Right now, as we speak, Miami, Florida, home of supermodels, has a serious flooding problem because what's happening is the ocean level is rising, and the seawater is being forced through the rocks underneath the city, and they come out. So even a little rain or a high tide floods their streets. I mean, this is I'm not making this up. This is happening right now in River City, as it were. So, and the whole state of Florida, the high point in Florida is 100 foot or something. I mean, it's not a very high state. Let's go with this gentleman.
If I could just ask a question, because we're talking about climate change, for example, flooding, making people move. Is it easier to move to a different planet or to start living underwater? Which one is easier?
Oh, so you want to go Gungan?
Much easier to a planet.
I would say
No,
I look at it from the point of view of it's a lot easier to build a submarine than it is to build a spaceship.
it's also easier to start living on water
Oh,
than it is to live underwater.
Waterworld.
That's true.
Another great movie, right?
That's actually viable and has been done on the small scale.
And hydroponics are.
And I spent 5 years in the Navy, and I am intimately familiar with what's called rust. And everything, including aluminum, rusts. And I'm intimately familiar with it's harder to keep pressure out than pressure in, because every 15 foot underwater, your pressure goes up by 1 atmosphere, by
Right,
15
hence-
pounds per square foot.
Well,
Yeah.
let me be
For
clear, when I
square
say on water, what I'm talking about is near land,
Platforms.
platforms anchored to
Sure.
anchored to the continental shelf, so you're not as worried about some of these issues.
I like it.
Yeah, and every time a hurricane comes through the Gulf, the first thing you see is a fleet of helicopters evacuating all these offshore oil rigs because.
Well, that's for it costs a lot of money to pay life insurance on that many employees. Let's just be real honest.
And they lose rigs every time a hurricane comes through. Every time a hurricane comes through, some of those rigs end up on someone's backyard in Pascagoula. Been there, done that, seen it, got the pictures. You know.
Well, there's an entire coastline along. Oh man, I wish I. So in Mississippi, right along the Gulf, there
Yep.
are house after house after house after house after house, but they're still there. In 2015, so at some point we got really good at figuring out how to keep them there, or they're being rebuilt every time there's a hurricane.
There are a lot of them being rebuilt. I mean, I was down in
There were also-
Pascagoula after Katrina, and Pascagoula was okay. Biloxi, just down the road, those big casinos that are on the water
Yep.
were north of US 10.
There are also
On
a lot
land.
of coastlines that have much gentler weather.
True, but not the ones that are going to flood. I mean, and we get hurricanes up as far north as New York State.
Well, instead of pulling it off North America, why don't we do it in the Mediterranean? Someplace that's known for a lot less in the way of massive hurricane type storms.
And does Africa have? I mean, they have a massive coastline.
I mean, we can also do things like the Red Sea, the Bosphorus. Lots
Yeah.
of places that are much calmer than the U.S.
Yeah.
So we can start with training wheels. For
Heck,
this.
even in the U.S., the whole West Coast isn't nearly as bad as the East.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But your water depth is a big problem. The west coast U.S., their continental shelf is like almost non-existent, just immediately big drop. Okay, we had a question back here. Sorry, I'm being
Yeah,
negative.
yeah,
had a
we
question
got
back
let off topic.
To go off of Hurricane Katrina and Florida, Boston getting hammered right now. That's very unusual, that area. Yes, that the north, I come from the east. East will get snow, a lot of snow, not usually in 3 days. I'm from the mountains. I know what it's like to be snowed in, but not 3 days later and you can't open up your front door. Also, to talk about climate change, I've had an acquaintance that when the communist government in Russia finally fell, they said to Poland, whom they basically took what they wanted and left the line, and said, oh, well, we're done with you, have a good life. Well, their infrastructure was about to fall. They were dumping raw sewage into their drinking water. Their crops were failing because they lacked proper irrigation. And they were told by Russian scientists and American scientists, you have 10 years and you will, as a population, die out because you're literally killing yourself. So what did they do? When my acquaintance, she had to go over there and say, okay, this is how you start purifying your water, this is how you start cleaning your irrigation system so that you can at least have enough fresh drinking water for the next 10 years and have something to eat while you're doing it.
And a lot of those Polish people also, as soon as they got the EU, they went to England and France and other countries. I mean, it's almost kind of a joke, but it's one of those jokes. It's a true joke. You know, if you call a plumber in London, you're going to get a Polish guy. I mean, it's like, I don't mean to be racist. It's like if you have someone cut your grass in the U.S., it's a Hispanic person. In Western Europe, if you have a lot of these manual labor jobs, it's Polish, it's Eastern European people doing it.
So
And
I wanted
one
to
last thing
yeah.
is the scary thing about Poland dying out because they can't grow crops is the reason why everyone invaded Poland was it was such good farmland. It really makes a point how bad things were there.
Actually, where do you get that from? I was born in '97. I'm a farmer. I don't know what you're talking about.
Historically speaking, Poland.
You know, like
Where do you get the barn farming? I'm going off of her statement as far as farm, but economically.
Economically, since 91 Poland is one of the best and stable countries in Europe.
So we've gotten pretty far sidetracked at
Yeah.
this point.
Are you dashing the moderator?
I'm suggesting that maybe there are topics beyond who would leave and why that we might want to discuss on this panel.
Okay.
Well, how about the biologists? Okay, one of the,
Since you brought it up.
well, no, I'm sorry, I don't mean, I'm.
That's fine.
Okay,
Okay,
but-
we've gone who. Let's see what needs to change.
Well, that's what I was going to go to the biologist for, because one of the problems, there's two problems with going to other planets. One of which is less gravity. The other which is, from an engineering point of view, running atmosphere at 15 pounds per square inch, which we're breathing here, is a pain in the ass, whereas 5 pounds per square inch, which is what the Russians ran in their rockets for years and years, is much simpler.
So the low gravity actually becomes almost immediately solved if you don't care that no one is ever coming back.
Oh.
If you accept that it's a one-way trip, real true colonization and you're not coming back, low gravity isn't that big a deal.
Well, can I ask a question? Why do we assume that low gravity, why do we assume it's going to be a one-way trip? What's the biological assumption there?
Wait, what's the question?
What's the problem with coming back?
So your bones and muscles will atrophy. They lose the ability to support the weight. Your whole blood circulatory system restructures. Your heart and your blood vessels are doing a lot of work right now to get blood up to your head.
Because of gravity.
Because of gravity. This is a real issue. I mean, obviously with people who've been up in microgravity environments, if they're up even for more than a few days, it will be days before they can stand up again, go from lying to standing up without risking passing out. Mars isn't going to be that bad by any means, but if people are there for more than a few months, it's going to have long-term effects on bone density, muscles, circulatory system. People who are on Mars for an extended period of time and then come back to Earth are going to have big issues with blood pressure, big issues with osteoporosis, big issues with heart failure and kidney failure.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate again, because I'm a devil's advocate. I know all this, I understand what happens in the microgravity, in zero G. My understanding, I guess my question is it a linear effect? Or is it a zero G versus enough G to get it up and down versus 1G?
I'm not sure I would say it's a linear effect, but it's definitely a relative effect. That you are definitely going to see these problems at low gravity as well as in microgravity. They'll just be less and they will take longer to have as dramatic effects, but you will see the same problems fundamentally.
Okay, so I want to be a pirate on Mars and I want to come back to Earth after I get my money. What do I got to do?
We need to figure out how long you can stay there. We can do some amount of help, like the same way we do with for the astronauts of weight-bearing exercise. We can help that, but the weight-bearing exercise will help your bones and your muscles. None of that is going to help your circulatory system. Fundamentally, the only answer is to come back to a full gravity environment. And I don't know how long you can spend on Mars before that becomes impractical.
Can we fake it?
Fake what? Generate gravity?
Fake gravity.
Oh, spinning, the classic one is a spinning cylinder where you spend hours a day doing stuff in this enhanced gravity.
Quite possibly practical on a long-term space station. I don't know if it's practical on Mars.
Well, the question at that point would be, how big is your gravity tank, and what are you doing in it?
Yeah.
We're going along with that whole space station concept. Say we're traveling between different gravity environments, like say Earth and Mars. So you spent 3 years on Mars, and you want to return to Earth, and your body's not going to be able to handle that and just go to Mars. Perhaps you have a long-term space station that, when you've got returning people to Mars, again, plastic cylinder thing, you slowly spin it up more and more and more to a Martian level, so by the time you get to Earth, you're on Earth level gravity. So by ramping it up and ramping it down over time, you might be able to
Take the edge off.
Cut the edge. So
That's a great question. Honestly, we haven't studied it enough because that's a hard one to study. But I can tell you off the top of my head, it's going to depend a lot on your age. That something like that would almost certainly work for young, healthy people. But the longer you've been there and the older you are, the harder it's going to be.
So us old fogies are screwed, is what you're telling me.
Don't come back.
Question, lady.
There's another problem we haven't mentioned about radiation in space.
Yep.
It's a humongous problem. The cancers and all the things that come after. We're shielded on Earth from the magnetic field, and you're not going to have that on Mars. Mars has almost lost all its magnetic field. And in space, there's not much. You're going to have to build some kind of a protection and stay in protection for the rest of your life if you're going to be out in space. And of course, the closer you are to the sun, the more that's, and there's radiation from elsewhere also. It's not just our sun, so that's.
One solution I've got for that one is the asteroid belt. You build yourself, you grab a big asteroid. It's got a whole lot of mass around it, and you hide inside. You basically drive the thing around. You find something you like, you eat it up, and you move on.
Yeah. Realistically, for Mars, anything on Mars would either have to be very well shielded or underground. Underground is in many ways the most practical for the biological issues. It's easier to contain underground. It's got its own set of engineering complications, of course.
Water is a great shield for radiation if you can get enough water. I'm still not sure how much water is on Mars.
Well, yeah, we think, it seems like every time we look, there's more than we thought there was, which is good news. And that was the other issue. I mean, there's a lot of places we like to go, asteroid belt, some of the asteroids, the Earth's moon, that are kind of lacking in water, as in none. So, so we talked about, and I'm not for sure I'm buying, and I realize the radiation is an issue, but there's a lot of reasons you're going to want to build a thick wall building anyway. Martian temperature swing is huge, and insulation from dirt is cheap. If you got to keep that pressure in, even 5 psi is easier if you got a lot of dirt holding your building down. I'm not seeing. Now, you talked about gravity. Is pressure going to be an issue?
So, I mean, people do live at certainly lower pressures than we do here. I don't know specifically about going as low as 5 in terms of long term. It's certainly going to help if you keep the oxygen content higher.
And we already have casinos that do that now, right?
I
So-
think the Russians run 40% oxygen at 5 psi, so it's twice as much oxygen at a third the pressure.
Yeah, I don't know about any long-term studies on long-term complications of low PSI off the top of my head. I can think of, I mean, certainly once again, there's gonna be some potential, blood pressure, homeostasis, blood pressure related complications. But I think most of those would probably resolve with a period of adaptation. I don't know off the top of my head whether there would be any long-term issues.
So I lose my my high blood pressure problems in low gravity, and I gain it because I'm low pressure, is what you're telling me. So I'm still on pills. All right. So we talked about why. We talked about who goes. We kind of alluded to why going. So one of the questions is, what will it take to bring about a true solar system? What are we missing here?
Cheap surface to orbit. That's the big one that I see. We need something to affect the serenity. Something that can just say, oh, we want to make a hop to the moon. No problem, jump in. Without that, it's pretty much a non-starter. Right now, to get a pound of stuff to the moon costs what, $1 million? And at that point, if you're building an economy, what in the world? What can you even think about that would be worth enough that $1 million a pound back and forth would be worth it over and above the price of the thing?
That's right. That's the whole thing.
Well, let me ask. Okay, it's $1 million to get a pound to the moon, but 90% of the lift of the weight of a rocket is fuel, and there actually is fuel on the moon. I mean, it's aluminum oxide.
We don't need that much fuel either. I mean,
Right, it's
if you go
aluminum.
to science fiction, Heinlein was talking about this 50, 60 years ago.
Aluminum oxide and aluminum and oxygen will burn as a rocket fuel. You need, it's 1/6 escape velocity to get off there, and anything you launch off of the moon's surface, unless you really plan it, is going to hit the Earth.
The big
The moon is a
issue,
harsh mistress.
the big issue is getting from Earth out.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking about the moon, you're right. If we're talking about Venus, we're talking about Mars. It's an entirely different kettle of fish. You've got to pay the speed to get off the planet, and then you have to
That's true.
pay the speed to get from there to here, and then you got to slow down. And that's a lot of fuel.
Slow down assumes organic matter. I mean, assuming you can target it well enough that you can somehow make sure it doesn't actually cause impact too badly. You don't need to slow it down. But
Yeah,
Terminal velocity is, a wonderful
that's
thing.
what I'm saying, organic matter. If you're sending iron or uranium or something like that, assuming you can make sure it doesn't cause a catastrophic explosion when it hits.
The difference between a catastrophic event and an extinction level event
Yeah.
and a delivery on that case is aim. And I really don't want to live on a planet where extinction level events are a possibility of a computer glitch.
Computer glitch by the lowest bidder, and the guy on third shift. Okay, well, that's a point, but I mean, if it's small enough, on the other hand, if you're sending a small individual packet, it's not an issue. So,
How small are you going to bother? How small are you going to bother?
Right, sending
And
from.
secondly, I'm trying to send this thing to San Diego, and it's 500 pounds. Not big. Oops, I get it off by a couple degrees. I hit downtown San Diego. It's gone. And I don't mean there's a big crater. I mean most of the city is gone from the shockwave.
How about space elevators? There's been some talks about that.
Space elevators have one major problem, in that getting from here to 100 miles up, which 60 miles, 100 kilometers, which is nominally edge of space, is the easy part. It's getting up to speed, orbital speed, which is about what, Mach 25, and that. Think about. Do you know of any aircraft that go Mach 25? The only one I can think of is are quite literally spacecraft. We are learning to do Mach 5 at all but orbital speeds. It takes a ridiculously large amount of fuel and ability to get up to those speeds. Even if you're not worried.
The space elevator, you go up to geosynchronous orbit.
Mhm.
And if you're at geosynchronous orbit, because of the way the physics works, you're going at orbital speed. So if you just take the box and hand it and just drop it, it's just going to sit there.
Not according to XKCD. And I'm sorry, it is a terrible way of saying it, but Randall does the math, and he's the kind of guy that says, no really. And he shows the math, saying, no really, if you let go of something at the top of a space elevator, it's gonna drop like a rock. You're gonna be at 90% G at the top of a space elevator, and it's gonna fall.
No, it's gonna fall. The issue with maintaining orbital speed, though, as far as I know, is air friction, which does not actually occur and drops very quickly as you drop pressure. So again, the space elevator is a weird thing there. It's very counterintuitive.
Well, and the real problem with space elevator is we ain't got nothing to make one out of.
We're getting close.
Well,
The real issue is it solves part of the energy expenditure, not all of it, because you still need to get enough energy to pull the pounds up to that amount of basic potential energy. It's potential energy after all. We spend a lot of it right now on fuel, but even if you drop the fuel, 9% is fuel, you still have a lot of energy that you need to expend to get it.
yeah, but if I could have a big heavy generator on the ground making electricity to run a elevator,
Or I have a whole bunch of solar cells at the top of it.
Which makes a lot more sense than
Mhm.
the generator down there, actually. But again, those are actually in some sense solvable. Maintaining it as a stable structure is the engineering difficulty that is getting solvable as we go.
I know that people are talking about graphene as one of the options. I've seen people do math and say that to build a space elevator out of iron, it would need to be, I think, somewhere around 1 to 5 miles wide.
Well, so it's a standard literary device, right, to put out something a space elevator that destroys the planet. I mean, Ben Bow wrote about Mercury, where in the past there had been a space elevator on Earth, it went down, wraps around the planet, caused a bunch of damage. We're talking about Mars, I mean, in red Mars, green Mars, blue Mars series, I think it's the middle one, where
he drops the elevator.
Mars wraps around the planet and causes a lot of damage. And Chasm City has got an elevator that's, somebody blows up the base and it wraps around some exoplanet, 10 light years away. So I mean, I don't know how many others are, but I ran into 3 different cases where
Okay,
it's a
I'm looking.
standard disaster in the book.
It would be a disaster, but it wouldn't be an extinction level event. You're talking about this thing which is up to geosync. That's what, 300 miles?
23,000.
23,000?
23,000.
Okay.
So, and it's got to be twice geosync because it's got a counterbalance. So it's 46,000, so it wraps around the Earth twice. It's got to be at the equator. And you start looking at a map of the equator. You start looking at all the countries on the equator, and there just ain't a whole lot of them that you want to do business with.
Well,
I mean,
a good portion-
and we ain't got the material. And if we got the material, or even we got the material that was half as good as what we would need for a space elevator, you could use that material and make a really, really, really light rocket that you wouldn't need a space elevator. So I think space elevators are going to be like, passenger zeppelins crossing the Atlantic. You're just not going to see them.
I mean, no matter how light your rocket is, the weight cost of the fuel to get out still becomes a big issue.
Yeah, you're still talking fuel to get up there, even if.
Fuel's cheap.
But the weight cost of the
yes.
fuel.
I've heard it discussed, put one on the moon, that would make more sense. You can't cause that much damage, a lot smaller scale, I don't know what the whole number is.
Except it's 5 times as long, because it's got to. The way that space elevator works is the midpoint of the elevator has to be on geosynchronous orbit to the moon, because the moon moves.
Oh, not to the
revolves.
moon, one on the moon.
Right, but one on the moon, it has to be a geosynchronous orbit to the main body, to the moon, which means since the moon spins so damn slow, Geosynchronous orbit is way out around the L3 point. It's around 3 or 4 times longer.
I haven't looked at the details, but that's the one I've heard in recent years. They say, well, on Earth, it might be possible, but on the moon, it may be there, it makes sense, and I don't know what they've done.
Well, and also getting off of if you're already at the moon, we were just saying before, leaving the moon is not nearly so big a deal as leaving Earth.
No.
Yeah.
Speaking of colonies,
Well, we're talking about getting-
putting one on the moon would probably be a wonderful first step for our goal.
It's true. It feels like it's mostly sort of a show-off move, though.
Because it's too easy?
Well, no, because it's not. It's unlikely to be self-sustaining. It's unlikely to really bring back anything particularly that we want.
Which is another thing we don't need. No one's using helium-3 right now, and at least in any industrial level.
Whenever anyone talks, everything I've read about colonizing the moon, helium-3 always comes up because everyone says this stuff is so much easier to deal with. If no one's come up with the technology for it yet, I understand, move on. But since it comes up so freaking often, I was assuming.
It comes up so freaking often because in theory, helium-3 is easier to run through your fusion reactor than anything else, comma. We ain't got a fusion reactor that works works either. So
It's like saying that-
Last year, some breakthroughs.
It's like,
Lockheed Skunk Works says they're coming. They're going to have one in a decade. And
in a decade, they're probably still going to be saying we'll have it in a decade.
I'm skeptical as well.
I also kind of look at it as the highest energy you can carry per pound is hydrogen. Why don't we have any vehicles that run on hydrogen? Because it's a pain in the butt. It's one of those comma, and then there are all these reasons. And helium-3 is sounding like it's another one of those things.
yeah,
We do
hydrogen.
have hydrogen-powered vehicles. I mean,
Yeah, but they're mostly stunts.
sure,
Well,
sure.
hydrogen. Yeah, hydrogen's got a huge. I mean, hydrogen when it burns. It's invisible. It burns in the ultraviolet. You can't see it burning. It's so small, or the molecular weight is so small that it will go through wells. Wells that would keep natural gas safe, it will go right through it, and it goes up because it's light,
Right.
and you can't smell it. It's like natural gas on steroids.
The hydrogen-based cars are usually fuel cell-based.
Yes.
And the problem with fuel cells is that they need a catalyst, and the catalyst everyone uses is platinum. And the reason why no one makes you have a lot of the amount of platinum that's laying around this hotel right now is massive because of the number of cars. There's a ton of it in your
Catalytic converter.
And the amount that's in your catalytic converter is nothing next to the amount that they're using for in your
hydrogen.
fuel cell vehicle. If someone can say, here's tungsten, here's how to use it instead of platinum,
Right.
the guy is going to be richer than God.
No, see, actually, I think, coming at it from my perspective, the answer to that is a biological catalyst. So enzymes are amazing at this sort of thing, and what we need is to develop a biologically based catalyst that we can just churn out the same way we churn out all the other proteins we need.
Well, the problem I see with a lot of biologicals is that they're not stable over a wide range of temperatures.
That's true. That would be an issue with space flight. It's not necessarily as big an issue with.
Well, fuel cells run at hundreds of degrees because you're basically.
We can work around that.
I'm saying how your average a number of viruses break down sitting
Right.
on the table because they're not because the biology on
Right.
because the enzymes and such aren't stable at room temperature. Never mind at 0 degrees like outside.
Right. We can develop enzymes for a particular range of temperatures over a wide range of temperatures,
Mhm.
but we need a fairly narrow range to keep it in.
Oh,
That's
right.
the thing. Like, you want an enzyme that works at almost the boiling point of water, we can do that. but it probably isn't going to work much colder than that.
So at this point, it sounds like we're going towards a sort of biomechanical design spaceship, where the spaceship will actually live in, which has been discussed in some sites.
I don't know, I want a living spaceship. I mean, what if the spaceship decides it doesn't want to,
Well,
it has
depends on what you
indigestion.
define as living. If we're using proteins and such, that's one thing. And my dinner tonight was made out of proteins and enzymes. It wasn't living. It was at one time, but it wasn't now.
But maintaining a stable container for those enzymes is kind of like creating a
Right.
human body.
So the easy thing to do with enzymes in actuality on that is to replace them frequently. And that does require maintaining a colony of some sort of yeast or bacteria that are producing them. It's relatively easy to extract them from those yeast or bacteria.
I work with yeast a lot. Yeah, it's really easy to work with them.
Is it possible to kind of keep the bacteria in a happy place, and that each to have a dozen enzymes that are geared towards a range of temperatures, so that now that we've achieved this, now we use this enzyme, now we use it, right?
So you would need, so unless you're maintaining a way for the yeast to survive in your actual engine,
Right.
which is not impossible, that's a whole different issue. I was thinking of the extract it and then use it in concentrated form, which is a somewhat different procedure. To use it live, then you have to deal with all of the issues of maintaining a live thing in your engine.
Never mind, it's a live thing that if you swallow it, it causes the hydrogen in your stomach to start to burn. No, thank you.
But on the other hand, the same thing that keeps yeast alive keeps you alive. So if you've got an environment, if your ship has got a life support system that keeps you alive, it's got a life support system that keeps yeast alive, whether you want it or not. You're going to,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it as seeing, you're going to have your fermentation reactor system. And you're going to want to keep that separated from the rest of your from the rest of your crew. Because quite literally, if the thing breaks and liquid spills, all the hydrogen in the area is going to start to burn. And it's not going to go fast. It's not going to be concentrated. But the probability of a biocontamination is still there.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, when we start traveling around the world, right? We don't do it in a 747, right? We start out with like a rowboat and a canoe, right? And it's a very manual process. Is there some reason why we have to imagine that getting to space is the next? We might just think, well, let's just start over, but now we know all of this stuff, and make it a very manual process where there's, moving of this around, and we do the best that we can with everything in containers, and then when there's an interchange, then
to a certain thing, there's an energy problem, there's a certain minimum amount of energy you need to burn to get up to orbit. It's roughly equivalent to the amount of energy it takes to fly a 747 from Los Angeles to Sydney, Australia. And it just, you got to burn it, and you got to burn it in a fairly quick amount of time because, you got air resistance and all the other problems. So, but once you're up in orbit, you can get anywhere you want to. If you really want to, you can just stand on the back of your ship and just start chucking stuff, and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
It might be your great-great-grandkids that get there, but
The difference between a gun and a rocket is which part of the equation you care about. If it's the bullets, if it's the projectile, it's the gun. If it's the recoil, it's the rocket.
So one thing that was brought up that I wanted to come back to was the idea of living fuel cells. And now the idea of biological fuel cells is not the thing that would get us off the planet, but it's actually a very viable one for longer space travel or maintenance of a colony, because it's actually, we're getting to the point of having these, and they can actually be a very easy to maintain solar cell, essentially, that happens to produce oxygen for you.
We've been blessed by a true rocket scientist who snuck in the back door. No.
So is he gonna tell us what, so is he gonna sit there and laugh at us, or is he gonna tell us what we're saying is wrong?
I'll go for the flag.
Where were we? We got lost. Here's a thought. You know, whether or not we need platinum for catalytic converters, there's a substantial market for platinum and other platinum level materials.
Yeah, the platinum group in general is damn handy.
Yes, and there's a substantial market for it, and it goes for on the order of $30,000 a pound. You know, the moon, I would think, because it's been bombarded by meteors, there would be parts of the moon that would have platinum on it from meteors. It's close enough that you could remotely control a robot from the ground here on Earth if you can get it there.
And we're figuring out that that's not hard. We're getting good at that.
And if you can mine the aluminum to make the fuel, you can land an empty rocket there, have your little robot go dig the platinum, put it in the rocket, and send the thing back.
Well, if what we're doing is sending back slugs of metal, why bother with a rocket? Why not build a railgun or a coil gun and literally toss it home?
And we're back to the hard resources.
Uh-huh.
Because it's up, well, I don't know, other than the capital cost of building a railgun and powering it to start with, as opposed to, you know.
Well, you're sending a robot up there to do construction. Your mining robots are going to basically be construction. They're going to be refining metal, because we don't want to bring back a ton of ore to get a pound of stuff, and that is for gold ore. That is ridiculously rich.
Yeah.
A good gold mine gets an ounce per ton of ore. We don't want to bring down tons and tons of ore. We want to send back pounds of finished materials.
Right,
So
usable.
So basically, we drop the thing onto a spot where there's copper. Have it produce a coil gun, and just use sunlight. Put it someplace where it'll be easy to get, and toss things home. It'd probably be faster than building. It'd probably be easier than building rockets, and it'd also be less dangerous because you're dealing with rocket fuel.
It still seems that I know it's proposed that getting to the moon doesn't really, I mean, it feels counterproductive, but it seems like if we could be there and it's, you know, with a pretty easy trip back and forth, then we could operate from there these kinds of things where everything shows up on the moon, and then then you can have like people there and things can be sorted and shipped back and forth.
We could quite easily use the moon as the gateway to everything else.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and I think the reason, you know, I mean, there's an obvious reason people are going to want to go to the moon, and we had this conversation at my panel last night. You know, people want to go visit things. They want, you know, people pay real money to go to Antarctica to look at ice. We got all the ice you want to look at.
Piled
right?
up in the parking lot, yeah.
Yeah.
People
All
pay-
right.
Virgin Galactic is charging $100,000 for you to look out the window and see black and the curvature of the Earth now.
And
Yeah.
people pay real money to go climb a mountain in Nepal, you know, and so people will pay real money to go to
Other places.
and the moon.
Places, yeah.
And the other part of that equation, I think, from a colonization point of view, is if you're running the space hotel, if you're running the lunar hotel, you know, and the guy walks in and wants a salad, he's probably not going to pay $10,000 for a salad. And you're going to want to grow as much as you can and recycle as much as you can on the surface, which is going to get you the technology you need to run a colony.
Well, I mean, the issue of hydroponics, that's relatively solved. I mean, the idea of
Just ask anybody in Colorado.
the idea of growing plant-based food on your colony is not inherently that hard. We've grown plants in microgravity. We know the complications, and the moon isn't even microgravity. We can work with that. That's not that big a deal. Having any animal-based foods there is going to be more difficult.
But we have,
Right, I was going to say, as long as people don't mind having it be entirely vegan.
well, we have
then we're-
tofurkey now, right? I mean, we don't even need, you could,
It's,
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
it, 80% of all corn comes to market on the hoof?
Mhm. Yeah,
Just
so,
just to give you an idea of, and how much corn there is in the food that you eat now.
oh, it's insane.
Yeah, and 80% still, that's only 20%. The rest of it shows up as beef and pork.
I'm so incredibly happy that no one has, like, the idea of biofuels that are like a food source, like, drives me. We have, so in the last 7 years, right, we've had almost no inflation except for, right, we've seen food inflation in that the packaging keeps getting smaller, right? We're paying the same amount, but in America, we've engineered away inflation by making everything smaller, and it's because we're burning corn in our gas tanks, right? Every gas thing says may contain up to 10% ethanol, and because we're now burning in our cars, we've just now increased the cost of our food supply just
And we can fix that very easily.
very easily.
Well, the fix is to legislate out
The mandate, the ethanol
no,
mandate.
not the mandate. You can leave that and still have the trick, because ethanol is a very good oxidizer for gas, and during the summer you do need an oxidizer in it, and it's something that isn't toxic. I mean,
You like
that-
lead?
Yeah, it's that Brazil produces
Oh, right.
ridiculously
Right.
large amounts of it from sugarcane.
Yes.
We could, instead of doing it from
Corn,
corn, you could do sugar
Yes,
beets.
yes.
In
which
the
no one
US.
wants to eat. Yeah.
And we could do
My
it.
grandmother likes sugar beets, I think.
There's
the
one.
the big problem is, but we grow corn here.
Right.
That, there's that, and corn keeps. The moment you pull a sugar beet out of the ground, it starts turning sugar into carbohydrates. And any beer brewer knows that it's a pain in the butt to convert the stuff from carbohydrates to sugars. If we could bioengineer it's something that could take the complex carbohydrates, or even better, good old-fashioned cellulose, and produce ethanol, we'd be done free, because you'd just be shoveling literally grass
Right.
into these things.
Well, in Cosan, CZN is a publicly traded company in Brazil that produces this ethanol. So the fact that there are shareholders, that it's profitable, and that it's publicly traded says that it's economically viable, which is the concern of every alternative energy in the United States. Is every time somebody brings it up, they say, well, it doesn't pay, right?
It's so economically viable. The reason why we don't use Brazilian ethanol here is because it's tariffed.
Oh, sure.
The
No,
US ethanol
yeah.
production is protected.
Yeah. Well, we need to produce our own, and we need to stop using food to do it.
Well, the trick with that, there is another side of that one, is that people call it a net energy loss, assuming that you throw the grain out after you make ethanol. And you don't have to do that, because 80% of all grain goes to market on, and pigs and cows eat spent grains quite happily.
Sure.
Yes, that was how bourbon came to be, because they were.
Oh, I was going to say, you realize this is not by any means the first time that America has had an excess corn being turned into ethanol, becoming, a serious issue for a wide variety of reasons. Like, that's what Prohibition was about.
Yeah.
But we are so far off topic.
Mhm.
What about solar powered cars? Wouldn't that be a whole lot easier than growing our fuel?
Well, if you don't want to drive during the day, yeah.
Yeah, and the efficiency of solar is still just laughable.
The other problem is energy density. The gas in your
Right.
car is so energy dense, it isn't funny.
Yeah.
I'll mention XKCD again. He said, what has more energy in it, my smartphone's battery or my Zippo? And the answer between the two is the Zippo by a wide
Yeah.
margin. The other question was, what else in my pockets is anywhere near this energy dense? And the answer is my hand.
Yeah.
My hand, the fats and such in my hand, just as part of my body, has about as much energy as your car battery.
Yeah.
Brings us back to
Right,
biological
right.
enzymes.
Realistically, I mean, the idea of solar-powered cars, it's not going to be a car with a solar panel, wouldn't be a car with a solar panel on it, it's an electric car that is charged by energy from
Right.
a solar array.
Well, and, you know, back in the 70s when Jerry O'Neill actually believed NASA's estimates of how much it was going to cost to fly the space shuttle, which our scientist in the corner can tell you a story about when you buy him a drink at the bar. He's ignoring me. The space shuttle. Anyway, I'm trying to get you some drinks later on. Tell your space shuttle story. And back when the space shuttle it was thought it was going to fly cheap and frequent and all that good stuff, a guy named Jerry O'Neill came up with this whole concept of building space stations on low Earth orbit, mining the moon, and building large solar power plants in orbit that would beam power down. And he published a nice picture book that came out in the 70s. It was full of beautiful pictures of these space stations with everyone running around their 1970s haircuts and their 1970s polyesters inside of it running around. You know,
How are you going to transfer that energy down?
microwaves.
Have you played SimCity?
It's like, oh, so you mean you're gonna set up near cities spots that are hit by death rays?
That is exactly, this is what brought us to SimCity.
Yes, large death rays.
Large
Gigawatt death rays.
Again, with your city is quite literally destroyed, SimCity style, because of a computer glitch. No, thank you.
I didn't say it was a good idea. I said it was a beautiful idea.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's just one of those but.
Well, there were a lot of comma buts in that idea that you know, I mean, once you got past the pretty pictures. So, what?
Do we want to do what we want from out there, apart from land, lots of lands and starry sky above?
Sure.
Really? Until we quite literally get a Serenity style spaceship, nothing. There is nothing out there that's anywhere near valuable enough for us to go and get. If you want to put people up on Mars and have them export information, that works great. Anything else? If we wanted to hit Titan for petrochemicals, but if you're going to do that, you can use the energy it takes to get back and forth to do thermal depolymerization of chicken bits and make petroleum that way and probably get more for less energy.
Right.
Or Fisher Tropaz for the coal. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But and again, this is the conversation we had yesterday. It's, you know, launch costs are key. What you can do and what you want to do depends on how much it costs to get up there. And the getting to Earth orbit is half your battle.
Yeah. And
You know, once you're in Earth orbit, you know, any old light little bitty thrusting thingamajig you can think of will get you anywhere else than you want to. And actually, if you have a continuous acceleration, even at 100th of a g, you know, you're getting to Mars in 30 to 40 days.
Yeah, you remember the TIE fighters, twin ion engines? Those things are real.
Yes.
They are quite real. You take the ion engines we produce nowadays and stick it on a wire, on large chains because they're all kinds of heavy, and turn it on at sea level. It don't move, but it'll take you there. It's acceleration with patience.
Yeah.
Is that the line?
So, okay. So he says there's nothing to get. I say it depends on the launch cost. What do you guys say?
I think that, as you say, unless the costs unless the costs come down drastically, I think the only thing that will send people out there is getting away from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's assume that we've got the Millennium Falcon and Serenity. Number one, platinum group.
Yeah.
Osmium, platinum, gold. Copper, we're running low. Anything else people can think of? What are, does anyone?
Well, I think one of the things to look at is, and this drives me nuts sometimes because there's the alt space group, the optimistic alt space group that, well, if government would just get out of the way, we'd have, our flying spaceships there, group. And they drive me bug nuts because, their grasp of reality is pretty tenuous. But, part of the issue is, even if you start putting mines on the moon, there's no water there. So you're going to have to, at a certain relatively low level of colonization, we're going to need a ice mine to support the lunar colony. So it can become a self-licking ice cream cone, as they say. We keep adding more stuff to this little pile of fun.
Assuming we've got a Millennium Falcon, can we fix oceans rising by offloading?
Oh, right.
It'd still be a hell of a lot cheaper energy-wise to pull it from an asteroid than it would be to pull it up from Earth.
Well, I don't think there's any impetus to do it unless there's a reason to leave. The costs are so overburdensome that, I mean, and it's not going to be economic. I think wanting to leave is going to be about what it has always been about. That you just cannot live what you truly believe with all your heart, or someone is going to end your life or make it miserable, and so you need the
Or
next
your country
place.
is underwater.
Yeah. The two big reasons I always hear about us going forth nowadays are because it's cool, and to make sure that that humanity survives a big oops that makes the earth unlivable. And I look at that and go, there ain't no money in either of those. So
Right.
you need to get Elon Musk on board. And
Oh, right.
Well, he just launched his rocket this weekend.
and
And he's trying to recover his first stage. He couldn't because of the weather, bad news. Good news is, unlike the last time he tried to recover his first stage, it actually hit the landing spot going at a speed that would have been survivable as opposed to the previous one where we hit the landing stage and went boom. So, and he's not the only one. I mean, even though Virgin Galactic managed to blow up their rocket ship.
no, I use him because he's the archetypal rich guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Get Bill Gates on board. Why does he want to open his wallet? Is the number one question.
His buddy Paul Allen already opened the wall. So.
well, and the other thing is, as we discussed, if you can ever get the price point of a vacation in space down to the point where an upper middle class family could afford it as a once in a lifetime big deal trip, then you have a serious tourism industry.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. If we can get to the point that we have OrbitCon,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Part of the point of the people like Musk and stuff are doing SpaceX and things like that. Part of the point is cheap transportation to low Earth orbit, not just enough.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Getting us into orbit, I can see that there is stuff we can do in orbit that's a lot cheaper and a lot more interesting. We're getting to the point where manufacturing might actually be some points. They're producing a perfectly circular sphere to recalibrate what a kilogram is. They want to say this thing is made out of this many atoms of silicon. It weighs this much. This is a kilogram. And being able to instead of having to spend literally millions of dollars on getting the thing to machine it, if we could just leave it sit in orbit in 0G, and it would form a perfect sphere automatically. So it would just be a matter of getting the materials there. Things like that might become a reality soon.
We've got 5 minutes left, according to my watch.
Woohoo.
So, any final questions or parting thoughts from the crowd? Oh, it must be Friday night. Everyone's waiting for the bar. All right. Let's see. Did we answer all the questions?
You didn't say anything about what if we go there and find someone else?
Because, well, we didn't know about it. We're pretty sure there's nobody else to find in this solar system. Although, if there is anyone to find, we'll find them. My bet is we'll find them under the ice in Europa.
Yeah, moons of Jupiter.
Yeah, because we're pretty damn sure there's an ocean underneath there. And by the way, there was a movie came out, Europa Report. It kind of came and went. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's very much worthwhile. But yeah, if there's anything to be found that's bigger than a microbe.
I'd bet even on the if we're looking for microbes, that's where we should be looking.
Well, we might find microbes on Mars or someplace, but yeah.
That's looking pretty unlikely at this point.
But yeah, if you're gonna find, so they're not here, but they could be the next solar system, which by the way is another great book to read, Three-Body Problem. So the Centaurians are coming, or as they call themselves, the Trisolarians. So, any other final thoughts? I guess everyone's thirsty. All right, well, I guess we're call a couple minutes early, so thank you for coming. I've got free bookmarks, and I'll sell you a book.